All right, guys, welcome back to another video. I hope you have been enjoying these lessons that I've been given. Um, Somebody said it's podcast style, so these podcast style lessons that I've been giving. But anyway, jumping right into this today, as you saw in the cover, this is the most important. I believe the most important person that you should be trying to chase in order to sound like. And at the risk of sounding corny, it's you. It's you. So let's deal with that and what that looks like. First and foremost, I know some of the people who may be newer players, or maybe you've been playing for a while and you tired of the way you sound. You don't necessarily like the way you sound. Well, we're going to deal with it today, and I'm going to show you some things that you can do to chase the better you, as well as giving you some of my story and some of the things that I've learned over the years, what it is, what I am talking about, and then what I'm not talking about, so that you can apply these things and become the better version of yourself. So first things first, how do you deal with not liking how you sound? And why is it important? Let's back up a little bit. Why is it important to pursue sounding like yourself? Why is that important? Because that is where you're going to be the most authentic in sounding like you. Everything you do is going to come out sounding like you, no matter how you try to do it. Now, there are people who are clones or who try to be clones of this person and that person, but it's nothing worse as a person that's observing somebody else, seeing somebody else who's trying to sound like this person or that person. Like we can see, in sports or in other things or other, like let's just go stay with entertainment, music entertainment, and you hear somebody and they sound like this person. You're like, oh man, they're just trying to sound like that dude, or they're just trying to sound like, Beyonce, or they just trying to sound like Donnie McClurkin, or they just trying to sound like Zacardi, or whoever, the person they're trying to sound like that person, and it's inauthentic to them because it sounds like they're trying to be a carbon copy of somebody else, and it doesn't have that essence of authenticity to it, because it's trying to be some, like for me, let's go bass world, since this is bass players. I hear people all the time, and over the years I've heard people, one of the most iconic bass sounds in our era is Marcus Miller. Marcus has an unmistakable sound, and when you hear people trying to sound like Marcus, it's obvious that you're trying to sound like Marcus, because we all know what Marcus sounds like. His sound is unmistakable. When you hear that sound, that's Marcus Miller. So you can hear bass players that's trying to sound like Marcus. I heard this guy say, and I love the quote, he said, one of the worst things about when you trying to show up sounding like or you try to show up and be somebody else, nobody shows up. I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, the person you're trying to sound like doesn't show up, and you don't show up because you're trying to sound like somebody else. So nobody shows up. That means you're showing up as somebody else, so you never show up to the thing. So the best thing to do is to try to sound like yourself. All right, now let's dive into what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. Now, when you're starting to, trying to advance and get beyond what you do, let's say this is one of your go-to runs, because I know y'all are gonna say, if I don't play, he had that bass and he didn't play the whole lesson. So I'm just playing. But here's like one of your go-to runs, right? So if that's one of your go-to runs, and like you do it in every song, and it's like, man, I gotta find some more stuff because I wear that out, or maybe somebody told you need to find some more stuff because you wear that out. Well, and I'm in the key of G major, by the way. Anyway, so the thing we should be looking at is, what other ways can we find to say the same thing? It's kind of like when you're looking to expand your vocabulary and you're writing something, you don't want to keep using the same word over and over again. I mentioned that because I got a book that's about to drop soon. We'll more about that at a later date. But anyway, when you're writing, you don't want to keep saying the same thing, because they have a thing where they say after a while it gets redundant, right? We don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again and keep saying or playing the same thing over again. So what we'll do is we'll go in the dictionary and we'll look up synonyms, right? Other words that mean the same that we could use, same as this type of word. Well, we want to do the same thing in our play. Other than that, we don't have to necessarily look up anything in the dictionary when it comes to our playing. When it comes to the things we're playing, we can take something that might be our go-to thing that I can do that in my sleep, right? That's a run that you do. Okay, well, take that same group of notes and figure out a different way of playing those notes. Maybe playing it reverse, right? So, ah, and that's how we work it out in our own practice time. So if we took that slow, I know I played it different again. That was it too. So that gave me a different way to play the same thing. I'm essentially saying the same thing, but I'm saying it a different way. I'm using the same group of notes, but I'm reversing the order of how I'm using those notes. And so doing that all over the fretboard or all over the different things that are my go-to licks, that's me expanding my vocabulary, and it didn't take a lot of time for me to do it. I hope this lesson can be short, sweet, and to the point, because I just want you to grasp this concept, because sometimes we can think too much. We can make things a little bit too complicated, and we can overlook the jewels and the valuable stuff that we have to say. It's kind of like this. We still transcribe people. We still, like, certain things I might say in my lessons or when I'm speaking to people, I might use a quote that I used to hear somebody say growing up, like a person said, they don't believe that fat meat is greasy. Well, you can use that in a conversation. Like, I'm talking to the fellas or somebody that I'm really close to, and I might say it my way that makes it funnier. Like, if I try to say it like somebody else or somebody that is a little more proper, or try to say it correctly with English or in base terms, say it correctly with theory, they don't believe that fat meat is greasy. Like that, like, bro, what? That don't have the same connotation as me saying, them jokers don't believe fat meat greasy. So now I sound like me saying it with the country slang and all that kind of stuff that I have, because I have a background growing up in Mississippi, growing up in the country, growing up backwoods, all of that stuff that comes with my personality. I implement me into saying certain things, even though, yes, I can speak certain ways that's appropriate depending on who I'm talking to, but it might come across a different way depending on how close I am to a person or how I want it to come across, how I want the message to be delivered. They don't believe that fat meat is greasy. It don't have a thing to it. But if I say, man, them jokers don't believe fat meat greasy, and I got something for them, I added a little bit to it, and it made it a little bit more comical because of the way I delivered the message. Well, it's the same thing with our playing. Maybe you have something like something like that versus that was just a little bit more bland. It didn't have enough seasoning on it, as opposed, that had way more seasoning. So figuring out, what am I saying? You have things that you're already playing. I'm trying to wrap this all up. You have things that you're already playing. They are already great. I'm for real. They're like, the things you're playing are already great, but you're not making them great because you might be approaching it with a very bland approach. Add some seasoning to that thing. Like, add maybe one note instead of doing. Like, well, I'm adding too much right there. So like. Like, adding a little seasoning that I did the first time. Notice I'm doing. Like, just bending a string sometimes. A little shake. Adding and just a little more personality to the notes that you're doing. So what am I saying in all this? Slow down. Slow down. Actually assess what you're doing, because where's the feel and like the expression of how the note should sound? Where's that coming from? It's coming from a later version of who you are now. That's where it's coming from. I don't know, that might sound weird for some people, but it's coming from a later version of who you are. I had to reverse engineer the person that I wanted to be in my playing in order to get there. I was hearing all these amazing players when I was really kind of working on my solo chops and stuff. Of course, Victor Wooten. Of course, the greats that have been out there, like the Marcus Millers, the Richard Bonas. I mean, we can go on and on, name Oteil Burbridge, so many cats. I'm hearing them and I'm hearing what they're doing, and they sound so phenomenal. And I'm like, man, that's light years away from what I would ever be able to do. But once I stopped focusing on trying to do what they do or sound like them or try to get close to what they were doing, and started focusing on trying to better my best each and every time I played, I noticed I had a voice. Now, let me add this, because for me to share all of this with you and leave this part out would not be helpful. You do have to do the work in the transcribing the people that you like, learning what they do as well. So when you come back to things you do, you can add some of the stuff that they were doing to some of the stuff that you're doing, because your touch on it is going to sound different. Going back to the little thing that I was saying earlier, you don't believe fat meat greasy. The way you say it, based on where you come from, based on, your culture, your upbringing, is going to have a slightly different flair from everybody else in the way that they would say it. So you bring that to your instrument when you speak, because this is another extension of the way you talk. When you play your instrument, it's another extension of the way you talk. So you bring all of that to the table when you're playing. So the way you express words, slow down, listen to the way that you're playing a run that you've been doing. So here's my challenge for you guys, to not ramble on with that. My challenge for you this week: find five of your go-to licks. 5 of your go-to licks. And spend some time and work out those licks. And what I mean by that, find multiple ways of playing that lick. Find at least 3 ways, like this, if that's your lick. Like, find another way to do that. Like, that's one way to do it, other than the first way we did it. And so let's mix up the notes again. It's the same group of notes. I'm just flipping it. So, like, let's take it again. Like, we can just keep working and finding variations by taking the same group of notes, your same lick. It doesn't have to be the same rhythm. It doesn't have to be the exact same amount of notes, but take a variation of what you just played. Find multiple ways to do it. That's the quickest and easiest way to expand your vocabulary, in addition to transcribing stuff. Actually, that will be faster than transcribing. Why would that be faster? Number one, you're not having to sit there and spend all the time trying to guess and see what somebody else has done. And secondly, you already know what it is you're playing, and you're more likely to remember what you already do than you are to remember something that's new and that's a foreign concept to you. So taking that, finding 3 ways to play 5 of your go-to licks, right? We can do the math on that, on how many now variations of things, about 15 things that we have now, as opposed to 5 that we were doing before. Okay. All right. So if we can do that, you're going to be in a much better place in terms of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to express musically, and just moving the ball along. So I just want you guys to do that. I want to share that with you all today. If you haven't already been doing it, make sure that you start today, because it's going to make a huge difference in your plan. So the person ultimately that you're chasing is the later version of you. And be aware of how you're talking to yourself, how you're talking about yourself. Stop putting yourself down. Your stuff is dope too. It ain't always this person, that person. You got some stuff that is dope too. Start believing in what you're playing and speak well of what you're doing, because it's going to make all the difference in the world and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish as a player. I told y'all I was trying to be short, trying to be sweet with this lesson. So let me know in the comments if this lesson was helpful for you guys. I got way more content coming for y'all. And I'm enjoying doing these videos. I'm enjoying sharing this stuff. And I hope this is helpful to you. I know it will be, but drop in the comments. Let me know what part of this that you identify with, which part of this is most helpful to you. And I want to know that you guys are actually doing the homework, working on the licks that you have, your go-to stuff, and you're working on the different variations of it so that you can get the best out of what you're doing. All right, I will see y'all on the next video. I'm out of here. If you, again, like this video, be sure to hit that like button, share it with somebody that it would be helpful for, and also drop it in the comments. And I'll see y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace.